You know, a question I get asked all the time is, how do I protect my business from a lawsuit? Well, that's especially important because when you start a business, you pour yourself, your blood, your sweat, your tears, and your money into it, so you gotta protect yourself. We're going to talk about an often overlooked risk involved in operating a business. You'll see why insurance is not enough. We're going to take a look at how your business structure impacts your vulnerability and potential liability. You're going to see how different entities can provide different or perhaps no protection. You'll find out which entity works best for protecting you and your business. I'm going to take you through the process of determining how much protection you may need. You'll learn an advanced strategy for gaining maximum protection. You'll see that there's more than just setting it up properly. Operating a business exposes you to potential lawsuits. Now, anytime you have any interaction with people, which hopefully as a business you will because you want clients, you want customers, you want to make sure that you have those interactions because that's what generates your revenue. At the same time, that's also what can potentially generate lawsuits because anytime you have two or more people together, there's the potential for conflict, potential for arguments. Well, that's how lawsuits start. So we've got to make sure that we have a protection plan in place because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That's why it's so important to make sure that you know what your threats are and how to protect against them. Now, another thing that people often make the mistake of doing is relying on insurance. They think, hey, as long as I have insurance, I'm great. Well, that's not the case. Insurance is not enough. Sure, I always recommend to my clients that you do need to have insurance. Fact is, I like to have insurance and then even an umbrella policy above that to make sure that I've got maximum insurance. But what most people don't recognize is that one of the exclusions to insurance policies is negligence. Well, that's what the lawsuits are going to be filed for typically, is for negligence. So you may think that you're protected, but guess what? You're not. That's why we've got to recognize and understand insurance alone is not enough. Now, it's important to recognize that your business structure determines your vulnerability to potential liability. I know that's a mouthful, but let me say it again. Your business structure determines your potential vulnerability to liability. What I mean by that is a lot of times people think, you know what, maybe my business isn't big enough, or maybe my business isn't doing enough revenue that would justify setting up a separate legal entity, so they mistakenly operate it as a sole proprietorship. Well, guess what? You may think that you're saving yourself some money, but you're actually costing yourself so much more money by not spending the money to set it up. Because when you have a sole proprietorship, not only are all your business assets at risk, so are your personal assets. That's why your structure needs to be established and operated in a way that provides you with maximum protection. Now, another thing that you need to know is that you don't have protection unless you take proactive steps to implement it. It doesn't just happen. This is something that requires you to establish a legal entity, maybe a limited liability company or LLC, which will limit your liability in the event that you are sued. Now, a lot of times people will look at this and say, okay, maybe I'll get that set up, maybe I won't get it set up. Well, I'm here to tell you, you need to get it set up. If you want to protect your business from lawsuits, you must have a protection plan in place. A legal entity like an LLC or corporation or maybe an S corporation helps you to get that type of protection. Okay, now the next thing you need to think about is to identify what the proper legal entity is. Now, one of the things that I always share with people is that with asset protection, we are trying to take the lid off. And what I mean by lid is that it's an acronym that I use for the three legal destroyers of lawsuits, income taxes, and death taxes. Well, we overcome these with asset protection, tax reduction, and estate planning. Different legal entities provide different benefits in each of these three areas. What you need is an overall plan that makes sure that you are concentrating and focused on all three at the same time. That's exactly the type of entity that you need to set up, and it may be more than one entity. That's something that we've got to factor in with your overall legal structure. This isn't a one and done. This is something that we're talking about protecting your business. You want to have a comprehensive approach to doing that. Now, a caveat that I always provide is that there's more to just setting it up properly. Actually, setting it up is the easiest part of the whole process. Just setting it up is basically filing the documents with the government. Well, that doesn't cover anything as far as your internal documents. No, if you set up an LLC, you've got to have an operating agreement. If you have a partnership, you need a partnership agreement. If you have a corporation, you're going to need bylaws. You're going to need resolutions. You're going to need a lot of documentation, because if you want to get the protection that you're seeking, you've got to actually do the things that provide you that protection. Not just setting it up. That's a big mistake that people make, and it's one I want to make sure that you don't make in protecting your business from lawsuits. Now, I got to share with you a strategy that I absolutely love. It's what I call isolation and insulation. Now, chances are you probably haven't heard it really described that way, isolation and insulation, but I bet you have heard it. See, what I'm talking about is isolating assets and activities into different legal entities so that we can insulate them from the potential liability of other assets and activities. When I say you've probably heard this before, it's called don't put all your eggs in one basket. Yeah, you've heard about it, because if something happens to that basket, now you've lost all your eggs. It's the same way with your business. You have different activities. You have different assets. We need to divide. You know, there's a saying, divide and conquer. I say divide to keep from being conquered. That's how we protect our assets. Okay, but the question comes up, how do I isolate? How do I insulate? Well, you've got to determine what activities you're involved with and what assets that you need to protect. Really, it's kind of an assessment. What I want you to think about is, what is it that you do with your business? How is it that you go about interacting with customers, with clients? Do you have marketing functions? Do you have management functions? Do you have other things that could be divided out and operated through separate legal entities? At the same time, you've got to think about what assets you have. Do you have equipment? Do you have an office building? Maybe even intellectual property. These are all things that could be isolated so that you can insulate them from one another. That's one of the greatest parts about this, but it's something you can only do for yourself, because you know your business better than anyone. As such, you need to think about this and do that assessment of determining what assets and what activities that you're involved with. Okay, now that you've made the assessment and that determination as to what activities you're involved with and what assets that you have, now I want you to think for just a moment about what type of liability might be associated with each of those. For instance, let's say you have trucks that your employees are driving around. Well, that's a potential liability, because what if they get into an accident? Well, guess who's liable? Not them, it's going to be you. So we've got to make sure that we identify certain things like that. Now, I know not everyone has trucks that they have employees driving around in, but that's just an example. You may have things such as clients that are speaking with your coaches. You may have people speaking with your sales representatives. That's where the potential arguments come into play, and those potential arguments may lead to potential lawsuits. That's what we want to avoid if possible, but we also have to recognize avoidance alone is not enough. What happens if our efforts to avoid those lawsuits just simply we're exhausted or they don't work? That's where we've got to have additional protection, kind of that backup plan. That's what you need to have as part of that overall comprehensive plan. You've got to make sure that you identify the risk associated with the assets, but also the activities. That's going to help you tremendously in protecting your business. Okay, now once you have done this assessment, once you've identified the potential liability, now you need to divide those assets and those activities up and place them in separate legal entities. Now, I know for some of you, you may be thinking, wait a second, how many entities am I going to need? Well, I would respond to that with, how much protection do you want? That's going to help you identify that. For some people, they don't need as much protection, because the likelihood of being sued if you're just purely investing in the stock market, someone's not going to come to your office and slip on a stock certificate and hurt themselves and then sue you. Well, at the same time, if you have rental properties, someone very well could slip and fall on the steps leading up to that house, and now they're saying that that's a result of your negligence and you are now liable to them. Well, we've got to protect against that. So when we look at different assets and different activities and we identify the risk associated with those assets and activities, now it enables us to better evaluate how many legal entities we need. It's something that I work with people on every single day, and it's something that you can do to sit down to make sure that you have the right plan in place because you've thought it through. Okay, finally, I would just tell you that you've got to operate your business the right way. I remember growing up, one of the things that my mom would share with me all the time, she'd say, young man, if you want to be treated like an adult, you're going to have to act like an adult. Well, That's a lesson that I use every day in my law practice and in our business, that I have to tell people all the time. If you want to get the protection of a legal entity, you have to act like a legal entity. Well, how do legal entities act? Think about it. When you worked for a company, chances are you didn't just go in and write yourself a check. No, you had to submit an expense reimbursement. You had to fill out documentation. Because if you wanted to make sure that you got that money, you had to fulfill your obligation. For whatever reason, sometimes people think, well, it's my business, I don't have to worry about this. Well, if you want to keep it your business, you do have to worry about this. It's not difficult, but it is different. The great thing about it is that you probably have experience because you may have worked somewhere at some point in the past. Now just apply those same policies and procedures to your business to make sure that you get that protection that you so desperately need if you want to protect your business from lawsuits. Okay, you've watched me so far, so I want to do something for you. As my gift to you, I want to provide you with absolutely free access to my mini course called Enlightened Asset Protection. In that course, you're going to learn a lot of valuable strategies for protecting your assets, similar to the ones we've talked about in this video, but then we go into more detail. You're definitely going to want to access that, so do what it takes right now to sign up for that mini course, Enlightened Asset Protection. I'm JJ Childers. Thanks for watching.